shines in the dark. It's time for your voice to be heard. Welcome to the Power of Purpose with me, Anton NM. We are still on African leadership. Now, before we went on break, we were talking about you, Mr. Augustinus. You're going to be talking about our perspective as citizens and our mindset. What do you say on that?
Well, it's an interesting thing. We wouldn't be able to talk about that without having to reference back to what Harry was saying, where our mindset need to change somehow.
Yeah.
Before I maybe say something, I want to bring up this message. I want to caution us, all of us, not people out there, me included, that the history will never remember the salaries we earned.
Okay.
The history will remember what we did for our country. And there seems to be a lack of patriotism within African setup. When we cry for jobs and we get employed, I want to understand, if we were to summarize it based on the standard of the nation as to what did the country benefit, would we come to a stand where we stand proudly and say, Anthony has contributed A, B, C. Or Anthony worked for 30 years in this organization and he must just get his retirement package. So that is too sad, because other nations are really doing so much to retain the dignity of the country, to place the country at the map, at the level where their nations are competing with the whole world. But it's unfortunate for Africans that we have only accepted the level of satisfying the basic needs, and the other things in the pyramid of the psychology does not matter anymore. So that is too sad. Because if you look at our fights on a daily basis, whether we are fighting our leaders or we are fighting our families, all we are saying is we want to get jobs and then get to afford the basic needs. But then the question is, why are we so short-sighted that we only think of today and we forget of considering the future? Was the strategy not supposed to be rolled out in a way that it starts with the basic and then it progresses to the advance, which is what I have not seen, both in leadership and in the citizens. For as long as we do not engage into having to expand our view and focus of us considering the future, we are not going anywhere. We boast, we are having mineral resources, we are having vast land, we are having oceans where we have fish and all the resources that you can mention in the world. But then, are we producing what we are consuming? Or we are like what Ali Masruri have said, that we produce what we do not consume and consume what we do not produce. Lots of people now, if you go in their homestead, they are craving for chocolate. Yet, you go in Ghana and the whole West Africa, they are producing cocoa. At no point have heard people engaging into discussion. I don't care if you produce cocoa or you don't. But I would have loved to hear a conversation for a country like Namibia and say, we are setting up a plant to produce, to turn the raw cocoa into chocolate. We don't do that. Switzerland, a small island next to Germany, have thought about it, and it has been producing chocolate over the past centuries. Why is it that? Now, whom do we expect to come and be able to do all these things for us? We want other people to come from their countries and do it for the pride of our country. Is that not naive to think of that in that setup? We are having our roads, and you see these engineers and surveyors who are going to school. All they want is, to get this salary and then drive BMW like Harry had illustrated, and the view is not just getting to take off from the basic need to advance. We get stuck on the basic and then we celebrate it until our retirement and death. That is too sad, because for Namibia to develop and Africa as a continent to develop and to retain the respect, it's not for other people to come and do these things for us. It's for us as the citizen to sit and think critically and find out how we can use our various skills to build and develop. We start small, we make our mistakes, and then move in the right direction.
Wow. Mr. Har, your take on that?
The country I have in mind, basically, they have resources. They have the population, they have land, though that's a bit of a debatable issue because of war history and that sort of thing. And then there's, they also had a certain raw material that was considered to be very valuable. And basically, their economy ran on that raw material, almost solely, without paying attention to the other things that they could also start growing. So it seems like, when there's that one achievement, even though it's in the basic stage, it's over celebrated. Look what we did. If we imagine it's a house and we tidy up the living room and say, guys, wow, look at this. Bedroom still in a mess, kitchen still in a mess, but guys, it's fine. All our guests will come here and that sort of thing. But one day, this is not going to be the main thing. And let me stop being so abstract. This valuable resource dropped in price value drastically. Companies shut down to the point that it almost caused an economic standstill. I'm sure you can imagine which country I'm speaking of. The tourism that used to happen outside of that country slowed down. Even the currencies that they were able to use in that country are now starting to dwindle off. And I know that, I know that it's actually happened to more than one African country. And part of that reason, just to also add to that, just looking at the basic, when we just focus here and we see, oh, look at that little part that's standing tall, we tend to focus on that and forget about everything else, even though that is not an amazing achievement in and of itself. In the grand scale of things, we can see the difference it has made. And I mean, we can also look at it from the stance of an individual. I went, one of the places I went to study, a lot of people came from the rural area. So the fact that, number one, they're not with their parents, freedom. Number two,
they're in a place with electricity. So whenever they, the light switches would stay on and that sort of thing, and they would act totally irresponsibly. All of a sudden they have money at their disposal with places where they can go spend it, and things like alcohol, parties and things like that, and it would go out of control. And this can also be equated to, how we, even as a country, let's say we have this raw material, we send it out and we see the benefits that come in. We don't see, okay, how do we manage this so that we are able to make more of this, but more like, oh, now let's celebrate. And then we keep on relying on that resource going out and still bringing in those returns. And when that goes down, we haven't established a contingency plan. There's nothing to substitute the revenue those things were bringing in. In fact, growth essentially hasn't happened. What happened is we just sold something which we'll never get back. Even if we still have it or still some resources left there, we did not even acquire the skills to say, great, they're not buying it out there. Let's see what we can do with it right here.
Okay, so we are still looking at the responsibility as a citizen. We have talked about the impact and the effect of all the whole process that brought about where we are in terms of leadership, corruption, and skills. And we say that skills we have. I feel personally there is still lacking a responsibility and accountability from us as citizens. First, we look at a nuclear or a small number of group called politicians who sit somewhere up there. And here we are as the masses. We haven't actually also prepared ourselves. We are screaming about development, job creation and all this, but we haven't prepared ourselves enough to say, okay, if this opportunity were to be availed to us, what then? It's another thing to cry for help. It's another thing to say, okay, here's a rope, can you catch it and get out? So, as young people, I'll go to you, Mr. Augustine. As young people, how much more do we need to prepare as a person, as an individual? Earlier you talked about the mindset, it's Harry, talked about the mindset, and you talked about the employment salary mindset of, I just want to get a job and stuff like that. As we are coming to this section, what should be now our mindset and preparation moving forward in order to change Africa?
Well, thank you for that question, and I will still go back and we'll reference back to what Harry has established many times over and over and over. Our mindset need to shift and look into the bigger picture. And we can only begin to look into the bigger picture if we live a purposeful life. I think there's just a mislink between us being alive as individuals and make contributions, and us passing time on earth to wait for the time to die. So one can only be able to live a successful life if they identify the reason why they exist in the first place. So that reason of existence will then establish the goal which they will be looking at, which can also be referred as a vision. Every one of us must have a vision.
Yeah.
It does not need to be for an organization, but me as an individual, what am I looking at, which I will keep waking up to and then work towards for the rest of my life. Because life and society has one tendency, that the success is the collective result of what each and every individual has done. Not necessarily what the group has achieved without the individual effort, but the collective result as a bigger picture, and that is being made realized by the individual effort. And if we sit down to look at the collective result, and each one of us identify, I did this role, I did this part. At the end of the day, we will begin to see that we will be moving in some sort of right direction. Secondly, we need not to be afraid to start. We are intimidated by the world's achievement to an extent that we are left paralyzed, and we are left to have lost hope within ourselves that if we start, we'll never catch up with the whole world. At the end of the day, it's not a competition of who is doing better than the other one. It's about what are we doing which is favorable for ourselves. So if we realize that that's what we need to do, then we will not put unnecessary pressure on ourselves, which will stop the process of us beginning small and grow as a process. So third, it's the mentality of excuses. When people say that it's not right, it's not the right time to start, I always tell them that perfect time is a fantasy and mystery. So for me, perfect time is a decision that a person makes to take a risk. Not necessarily that when you are to start, you are not going to face challenges. but you will start and then perfect yourself as you grow into the process. And when we realize all these bits, we are to connect them and then enable us to begin to move in the right direction. To end with this question, I would love to suggest people to read what, I'm not quite sure if John Spencer, but I know the last name is Spencer, who wrote about Who Moved My Cheese.
Yeah.
Africa has lived in abundance for quite some time. Somehow our mindset was made not to really organize ourselves and establish self-discipline and self-control. Because if you are to live in Congo, you know that anytime you go and pick a banana, come home, eat, you don't need to really think of, I'm going to build up a storehouse where I can keep the mango and delay their ripening time. You don't need to think about that because mango and bananas have been there over and over. So it somehow it taught us to be a bit careless. Now what we need to do is to begin to organize ourselves and put certain principles that prevents us in doing certain things or behaving in a certain way, and put this principle that can allow us to do things that can make us become progressive human beings.
Yeah.
If we do these things and realize that we need some decency, somehow we are going to start doing certain things that will also activate our leaders to realize that we don't deserve to be professional beggar at the scale of the world. Because as it is now, the reason why black lives are not respected is because we have made it known to the world officially, sorry, that, you know, that we really appreciate or we really are proud to be beggars, which should not be the case. If we ask, if we borrow, it should be for a reason. And our economists, I'm really upset. We can't have economists who wait for SONA and then they sit there, bring all these criticisms, and they are not doing activism at the household level where they teach a mother and the children, or the father and the children, to say that, you know, what you do in a household is what translates into GDP and whatever those fantastic terms which they use. We don't want to hear the intellectual terms. We want to hear how they translate these complex skills into simple skills which can be executed at the household level, at the community, at the regional level, at the national level, and later on at the continental level.
Great. It's time as African we begin to walk the talk or talk the walk. Now, I don't have a better word, but I'll use this one. You have sometimes called motivational speakers and transformational speakers. Now, we are moving into where we translate our words into action. There is no more just feeling good, sitting there, but what we are getting into now is to say, don't just sit there and complain. Don't just sit there and talk, good or big or small, but translate your words into action. Yes, sir, I'm getting to you.
Right.
We are coming to that point. We need to hammer the nail by its head. How do we move forward in terms of transforming us as citizens to get to where we're going to transform Africa?
You know, it's very sad when we have things that have turned into cliches,
Yeah.
or turned into what we call platitudes. Just a nice combination of words that give you that warm, fuzzy feeling, and yet they've lost their value. And I say that just before I say the one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Be the change you want to see. Everybody knows that. But it's just become a mantra that we just throw around casually without actually thinking every morning, what change do I want to see? Or not even every morning. I mean, if we look at our social media and that sort of thing, we see a lot of discontent amongst the youth.
Yeah.
People have opinions, people have reasons for saying what they're saying, and whether it's in good spirit or not, regardless, the fact is all of that is happening because something is wrong. But out of all of these voices, how many of these are actually saying what they're saying in order to be instrumental in leading to the change that they want to see? It's like an incident I had in high school. There was someone who used to tease me a lot. They would always criticize a certain characteristic that I had, and they would keep going and going and going. And one day, we got to a point where the person opened up and said, "Do you know why I always make fun of you in this regard? It's because of ABC." Now, the problem was when they criticized me, they were not informing me. They were not even, and they were also not demonstrating how I could do better or improve in this area. And at the same time, they were not lifting me up so that I could actually say that, you know what, I'm above this. Therefore, let me pursue better. None of that. It's like in psychology, they call it positive reinforcement. Using, encouraging words or that, the positive things that someone is doing right and accentuating those for growth. See, it works much more efficiently than negative reinforcement. You do something bad, you get punished. You do something right, you get encouraged. It seems that, and yet, in society, we are constantly giving negative reinforcement to our so-called leaders. We are, when someone, and when I say leaders, I'm not only talking about government or politicians and that sort of thing. Anybody who stands up with an initiative, even a small, simple thing. I remember online, someone announced within a group that they were going to start a magazine to help to help spread the word about what's going on in this group, which was, building up some sort of a subculture. Not one word of encouragement. It was just, no, people have tried. Good luck with that. Instead of, this what you're trying to do is also going to benefit me. How can I help? Can I write articles? Can I take pictures? Can I proofread? Or can I give you ideas and leads? Or there's so many things that all of this group is 14,000 people strong. In Namibia, 14,000 people is not a small number. And yet, if only half had said, where can I step in? We could have had a powerhouse by now, a media house, which is developed by this subculture. And the same thing is with our people. Same thing with our communities. We can look at, like you had mentioned, a small part of our population, which is considered our leaders, the government, and yet we take all the burdens and put it on them. What about us? So when we get to the point of, no. First of all, we need to switch things around, understand where the power truly lies. I believe, again, Ravi Zakir, a quote that I spoke of with you in the past, and you also, you reminded me, I think it was Hitler who said it.
Oh, Hitler, yes.
Yes, and if I may paraphrase, it went along the lines of, you guys can go ahead, write the constitutions and all of those things, but give me the songs of the nation. Let me write the songs of the nation, and I will control the future. If we understand the power of what we have amongst ourselves, yes, government can write legislation, government can do all sorts of things, but that's on that level, on a constitutional level, and so on and so forth. But here at the grassroots, at the bottom, if we say, guys, you know what, we need to just start a vegetable garden to start feeding this block. Why should government have to play a role? And yet we can feed people around us. When we say our schools are not doing so well, again, when we drive past those places in the rural areas, we have textbooks at home which we are not using anymore.
Yeah.
Or we have people who can maybe even empower or share knowledge with either the educators or people. It's just that whole thing of fearing to start.
Yeah.
And I think part of the fear to start comes from the fact that we feel that the first step is really insignificant. There's that, and there's also the self-preservation factor.
Yeah.
We see how we crucify people who stand up to show initiative, and therefore we don't want to be crucified ourselves. You know what I mean? So when someone says, has a brilliant idea, and they say, so why don't you go to that platform and say, me, so that people can, what if someone laughs? Why? That fear is there because, again, goes right back to the first thing I was talking about. Negative reinforcement. Anyone who stands up, anyone who's seen failing publicly is not congratulated or for the new knowledge they've gained, because they are better off, in terms of knowledge, they're better off than where they were before.
Yeah.
I did this, if they learn from the mistake, then they're better off, yes. If someone were to say, okay, what went wrong? How can we help you in this regard?
Yeah.
Just like I'll use I think for the last example, I'll use the Wright brothers. This program's about purpose.
Yes.
The Wright brothers, they knew that they wanted to pioneer flight.
Yeah.
Create, they wanted to do that. But they were not the only ones. There were other people who were highly educated, highly funded. The press was following them. They had the support of the Smithsonian. They had the greatest technicians and physicists of the country. These two brothers were in a little tiny place. They had a bicycle shop, and that's where they got their spare parts from, and they would take them every day. They would go and try and achieve flight. They would take spare parts with them, knowing they were going to fail. They were not doing it for the public eye. They were not doing it for praise or whatever.
Yeah.
Today they're remembered. Just like you said, when you do something for history, I mean, when you do something, that's how history will remember you.
Yeah.
This other team of people, as soon as the Wright brothers achieved flight, you could tell that their motives were not right, because they did not go to the Wright brothers and say, how did you do it?
Yeah.
Now with all of these resources that we have, let's team up.
Yeah.
Yes, we were not together in the beginning. They just packed up, shut down the project, moved on. Now, same thing.
Yeah.
When someone stands up, whether they fall or succeed, people don't run up and say, great, how did you do that? You're from my neighborhood or my community or my village. How can I make sure that I achieve the same thing? And the other thing that we need to change is the copycat mentality.
Yeah.
Because if someone sees, oh, so-and-so got successful by chasing tenders, I will also chase tenders. And so-and-so is only successful because they're very successful because they got a government position.
Yeah.
I will also chase a government position. That sort of Me Too, that copycat mentality,
copy and paste. Yeah.
presents another challenge whereby if I do not get that position, or if I do not manage to get in that space and time where those people are becoming successful, then what hope do I have?
Exactly.
As opposed to thinking out of the box, complementing and seeing where support can be provided.
Now, when you look at what you said and what you said, empowerment, supporting each other, and you look at what is happening in Africa. In Africa, one of the challenges, what you said actually, both of you, we can actually see it in other countries. When you look at China, how the Chinese come, another Chinese comes and begins to work in a shop of another Chinese. Second time, the Chinese has another shop next to him. So we see that kind of how Indians have done the same thing. The empowerment of each other. And wherever they are, that empowerment of each other translate to the economy of their country. Because at the end of the day, we know, you are in somewhere, you're into a business somewhere very big, you're going to translate that economy back to where you come from. And that is what is happening with China. And in Africa, we have that opposite. And somebody said it in a very nice way, the PhD system. Pull her down, pull him down. Okay, so it's a PhD system. So they don't want to pull you down, you know what you just said. We have an idea, again, they just want to find a way. And even we encourage positive criticism. We'll find that 90% of criticism is always negative. It's just pull you down, pull her down. So that is another disease, I don't know that you call it disease, but that is another problem as Africans we are facing, the support of each other. Now, many times, I wanted to say this, many times I've been attacked to say, the moment I say that phrase, that we are the government, don't just wait for a small minority who sit, maybe they are 100 or 200 in a boardroom called parliament. I've been attacked to say, you don't know what you're talking about. That's what the main thing is. I say no, but I've been attacked many times because people are still having the mindset that the whole redemption, I'm going to use that word, for their own lives is going to come from there and not here. Because when you look at the true movement, true development, let us not even begin to go on paper. If your household is begin to develop, his household begin to develop, my household begin to develop, that will translate into a community development. Is it not how the nations and the community develop? But no, we're not going to do anything. We understand, I'm not deleting the fact that the Constitution puts a boundary. The articles and the laws of the country, actually sometimes, I would agree that sometimes they do put some kind of limit on people. Because, I'll give you an example. If a constitution or an article or a registration is not well prepared, it can put limits on its citizens. But if it's well prepared, of course it gives liberty of expression as far as you can go in terms of your talent and stuff like that. Now, for example, I'll tell you, we have been battling as Africans in terms of creating our own medicine. Because now, somebody somewhere who has money and who controls the board of medicine decides. Now, as Africans, it questions how far is the boundary. Are you telling me because I am on this part of the dark continent, you are on the, I don't know whether that's the brighter side of the continent. Because they say it's a dark continent, which means there's a brighter side. We can't sit here with our doctors, engineers. You mean we can't come up with a malaria medicine? We can't come up with some of the, the sickness we have. So, I'm just illustrating in terms of sometimes the registration, how they put limits. That's what I'm trying to illustrate there. So sometimes the laws, whether it's international laws or country laws, sometimes they put limits. So we as young people, what I would advise as well is begin to look at in terms of all these registrations. Because I've seen a lot of young people, sometimes they have a business idea that can be quite big. And then the government comes in and they just shut them down. Then that idea just suffocates and dies right there. So I am saying, sometimes I agree, but we shouldn't just limit ourselves to say our solution is going to come out from that boardroom. As people collectively begin to walk in action, not just in words. So just to concur with my brothers here, the PhD, the pull him down, pull her down, it's another factor. And that, I'll go back to Tate Augustine. It has to deal with also our slave mentality, how we were colonized and where we are in slave trade and all that stuff. Because when you look at that, we're still being sold by our own brothers. We're still being sold away for salt and for clothes and for that. So it's still coming back It's just coming back in a suit, all very well civilized. But it's still the same system that we are so much at pulling each other's down. Beyond what we are saying, we agree there is corruption, we agree there is a dysfunctional leadership, but as youth who's supposed to build the next 40 years, we need to do something about it. What would be your last word, Mr. Augustine?
Well, I've got a lot to say, which
no, you still have close to 5-10 minutes. Yes.
Which may not fit, but I will try to summarize it.
Yeah.
First of all, Professor PLO Lumumba had stated one statement which moved me at the beginning of the webinars that he was hosted this year. He said the youth need to come together and irritate the leaders in an organized manner.
Nice.
So we are not saying go and insult leaders. We are not saying go and argue with the leaders.
Yeah.
But we are saying put together your expertise and do something within the community setup, like Harry and you have said.
Yeah.
So if at the grassroots level things are moving smoothly, at the end of the day, politicians depends on what the nation decides. They don't necessarily decide, because they are the populism, people who depend on the bigger crowd that supports their movement of political parties. If the community begins to move in a certain direction and say, we are not going to vote for you because of this and that, a politician doesn't have power. So we want to see citizens organized at the community level, at the household level, at the regional level, then it translates at the national level. Secondly, going back to the issue of PhD, which you have illustrated, it's not only Africans who have suffered that. If you read about Albert Einstein, you would understand that while he was at school, he was denied right to do what he wanted to. So it frustrated him. And he did not get the credit while he was in Germany until he moved to United States. And you look at the Wright brothers, they did not gain the momentum while they were in the United States. At some point they had to move to France, and once they showcased their ideas and the military people realized how good it was, then the VIP started using it as a luxury to just keep him in the air for 10-20 minutes. And that is what made them to get organized and do certain things. But it didn't happen in the United States. So the frustration have always been there, because the reality of life is that success is not merely the absence of challenges, but success is the preparedness to sacrifice so that what you conceive to be good and right to people get to be consistently presented to them. I suspect that the syndrome we are going through is what Vusi Temba of South Africa have stated, that we have a syndrome of I want to be known as the first person who established these things.
Exactly.
And that mentality brings unnecessary fight amongst ourselves, because each one of us want to emerge to be the first, so that we are written and celebrated in the newspaper and television that Anthony had discovered now the malaria tablet or whatsoever. But is that necessary?
Not really.
in the fight that we are putting up, is it helping us? Not at all. And at the national level or continental level, we just want to begin and already be at the world standard, where we compete with those giants who have begun from slavery. It won't happen.
Yeah.
If we begin to do things because they make sense to us, because they are good to our communities, then we won't put up the fight of, no, this did not match the World Health Organization standard or what. If we are able to help people at the grassroots level, then our economy can run within that community setup, so that we don't need to put up with no, the international standard rejects this, because then we want to enter the international market for us to benefit. And remember, these people have been benefiting over centuries. If you come there, you become a threat, which is one thing which they do not want. Therefore, for them to be able to avoid that, they frustrate and suffocate you. So we don't need to put up some of this unnecessary pressure. Sometimes we just need to wake up and do good things that works for us. So my whole message to us is that we will not be able to resolve all the issues. And whether we are going to have good leadership or not, it's not going to solve all the problems that we have. Problems will forever be there, not in a bad faith, but problems will be there to enable us to become victorious. Because victory without a fight is not victory. So these problems will forever be there. The nations that are doing well now are still putting up to the troubles of this world. So we as well are going to put up with this struggle for the rest of our lives. So the Eden syndrome of I will wake up in the paradise where I don't need to wake, I will just go and pick up apples. We need to understand that apples need to be watered. So there's no such a thing. For as long as we are alive here, we are going to face challenges. So what we need to do is pick up our confidence and start small. If each one of us play small in our role and make that small contribution, I believe we are going to resolve and reduce some of the pressure that we are having. I think that is the whole message that I have to my brothers and sisters.
Great. Mr. Howard?
In my humble opinion, with the picking up of confidence, there also has to be a certain drop in pride and entitlement. Because as long as we feel entitled, as long as we have this mentality of we are owed this, or we are owed that, or entitled to this and that and the other, we are going to sit back and feel entitled and not act. So I totally agree with Augustinus, and at the end of the day, if I were to sum up what I would say is, again, just reiterate, be the change that you want to be, and not just to say it as something that, we echo through history, but something that we really embody. All the way from how you conduct yourself when nobody is watching, to when you are with your closest friends, to when you are in a group, to when you are with the masses. Reason I say this, it can be the simplest of simple examples. You can be in public transport, receive the wrong change, be given $10 instead of $5, and when the person jumps out of the car, realizes it, and has the opportunity to stop the taxi, and they just let them go. And yet, when leaders have the opportunity to capitalize on the same mistakes or the same carelessness that, I call it carelessness, but it's actually supposed to be trust. They're entrusted with a whole lot. But if this is the character of the people that we're having around us, why are we expecting better from our so-called leaders.
Yeah.
You're just mad because you only got $5. You're mad because he got 5 billion.
Yeah.
Truth of the matter is, if that's how you would operate with five, given the same situation, you know, and that saying where it says, you know, absolute power corrupts absolutely, I don't totally agree, or at least in the way that I understand it.
Yes.
The way I understand it is, if you have power, if you have that power to say, you know what, I can actually do this, I can do that. I have, you know, if I'm in a position where people disagree with me and I have the power to either shut them down or hear them out, my true character is going to be reflected.
Yeah.
I have the option to say, in my personal state of being, and if I'm wrong, I apologize. If I'm right, I educate. So I believe that absolute power kind of brings out the true characteristic of the person. And if we are not, as individuals, training ourselves and our peers and holding each other accountable, as well as holding and as well as teaching our young ones accountability, responsibility, transparency, and then later on we expect it of them when they're in office, there's a little bit of a disconnect.
Yes.
So we start investing now in that sense. And I feel, you know, it really starts, in the words of Michael Jackson, with the man in the mirror. Look at that person, can you look them dead in the eye and say, if someone kind of slid a bribe to me, am I the type who would? And yet, we may laugh at those sorts of things, but it is that personal engagement that when the time comes, even though the temptation may be strong, you will have the integrity to actually turn it down. But if you never prepare yourself for that, when that situation comes, you might not, you know what's right, but you might not be able to execute it. So let's be the change that we want to see.
Wow. There you have it on this one, African leadership. We'll be talking, wherever you're going to be watching us from on YouTube, we encourage you to share with others and let us know where you are, which country, what you are doing. We want to be a collective voice as African. Now, in a humble, honest way is to say, because we are seated here, it's not like we're elites or special than you, no. We are just organized this to be able to voice out our voices as young people for the sake of Africa. And we want to hear from you wherever you are. Share this video and we want to know what is happening there and what you are doing. We want to become as one collective voice as young people. For the next 40 years from now, we have to define and design the future that looks like. I have children, he has children, maybe he does. Okay, so we want to see what's gonna be of Africa from now. Now, as you have heard, you may be able to contact us, contact any of my friends here and be in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. It has been a pleasure, it has been a blessing. Let's create the movement and let's create it with a humble action, lovingly coming together, begin to do something where you are, with what you have, with the people around you. Let us begin to build what we are looking for. Until then, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
It has been a pleasure. Mr. Augustine, thank you.
It was humbling.
Yeah.